I was a massive scaredy cat as a kid. Heck, I'm still a scaredy cat, but I've managed to cope with it more. Any cartoon violence or hint of sexual themes in media, animated blood or death freaked me out as a child. One movie in particular, jarring me and changing me for the rest of my life. Dramatic, yes, but just stay with me for a second. I was around 10 years old when I walked into the living room to see that my dad had turned the channel to some weird animation on TV. I just remember sitting down and going, "Dad, what is this?" as I watched in growing horror, to which Dad responded, "Oh, it's Pink Floyd The Wall, a movie based off of the album." Which, I knew of Pink Floyd the band, but I didn't know their music, or whatever The Wall was, or even what the heck were these animations supposed to be that I was watching. The scene was an animated metaphor of two flowers, basically having sex, or implied sex, to which the larger flower devours the smaller flower, and then a massive sequence of violence and screaming and a bunch of other stuff starts happening. Now, I just walked in on this, and being a TV addict, as any 2000s, 2010s child was, while I didn't understand the sexual metaphors and imagery, I sat and watched this whole sequence, and to say I was terrified would be an understatement. And my dad just let me watch this whole scene. Every now and then after that, I would catch the movie being on TV, and it was always at the creepiest moments. But more and more, I would think, is this music good? So before I continue, what is Pink Floyd's The Wall? Why is it a movie, and why the dirty flowers? Well, to summarize, this is a long summary, I'm sorry. The Wall is a rock opera album that focuses on a fictional rock star, who's called Pink, as he grows up dissociating himself after losing his father in World War II as an infant, dealing with abusive behavior from his mother and teachers in school, pressure as a rock star from his managers, occasional and more than occasional drug abuse, as well as a failing marriage. You may recognize the album for two of Pink Floyd's hit songs, Another Brick in the Wall and Comfortably Numb. But the album itself deals with a lot of the thoughts in Pink's head as the album progresses. He tries to block out this world of pain and loss as he builds up the wall in his mind. The album was turned into a film version a few years after the release, with the music itself dark and depressing. Also, having visuals to go along with this are nice and great for witnessing unknowingly for the first time as a fourth grader. As for the animations that I mentioned, the film is crossed between live action scenes that correlate to the music of the album that plays, corrupt hallucinations of hate speech and neo-Nazi terrorism, as well as occasional songs having animated sequences that act as more of a visual to what is going on inside of Pink, the main character's head. The animations themselves are fronted by artist Gerald Scarfe, who also did the unsettlingly gorgeous album art. The animations portray scenes of not only just death and violence and anger, but also symbolism of the bombing of London, sexual imagery as previously mentioned with the flowers, isolation, drug abuse, coping unhealthily. Gruesome caricatures of the people that Pink feels have most oppressed him also appear in his mind. The story in The Wall is heavy, not to mention extremely edgy, if not already obvious. So I'd walked in on what I would say is the moment in The Wall where Pink says screw it after just finding out that his wife has been cheating on him. And so now the wall is built through this gruesome Gerald Scarfe animation. It's rapid and violent, as everything inside the wall turns corrupt, flowers turning into barbed wire, heads being smashed in by what looks like a neo-Nazi. I'm not showing all of this imagery just because you can get the picture and I don't want to visually unsettle people unconsentingly. I don't think I slept right for 2 weeks after witnessing the animation. And that wasn't the only time I was accidentally subjected to it. I would walk in every now and then, within the next few months, to the wall being on at another animation sequence, which is funny because they're not super long when you watch the film in its entirety, but it was just great coincidence, I guess. My dad always just sat beside me, watching with me. He would explain the really depressing story, and surprisingly, that didn't make me feel better. However, despite the pinging fear and trauma from seeing the flowers do explicit things and then eat each other, as I was watching, I would start to realize the music kinda slaps. Okay, now I didn't word it like that, of course, it was 2008, but I started looking more into the music in the wall. Finding videos thanks to YouTube, I would find some other animation sequences that I hadn't already seen in the clips on TV. They would still terrify me, especially the animated caricature of Pink's wife, but the music just really caught my interest. Some time passed, and while I would listen to Pink Floyd more and more, I would grow more to enjoy the music. I found the song title that plays in the animated sequence with the flowers and building the wall and all of that chaos. It's titled What Shall We Do Now, and funny enough, this song isn't featured on the album itself, or at least not in its entirety due to lack of record space. But even with this, What Shall We Do Now is my favorite Pink Floyd song. As I got older, my dad would take us to cover band shows, since Pink Floyd stopped officially touring and having massive album tours a few years before I was born, which hurts now and makes me wish I had a time machine to go back and see some of this stuff, but I digress. And so I returned to The Wall years later when I was in community college and listened to the whole album, and all I remember thinking was, oh no, this is my favorite album. And then last year, I finally managed to watch the film again in its entirety, and while it is flawed, I still deem it a masterpiece. There's beautiful imagery in the live action scenes. There's a lot of deep symbolism seen in live action parts and animated. Most of the movie is unspoken, narrated mostly by the very sad music, and I think that I've just turned it into a coping mechanism. The Wall focuses on mental illness from a unique standpoint, which I find fascinating since it's from the late 1970s, and sometimes finding media that focuses on mental illness is hard to come by since it was a new terrain for people to explore medically. There's focusing on thoughts of isolation, loss, betrayal, abuse, and then there's parts that are either uncomfortable or horny with songs like Young Lust, or very sad to listen to. The song Goodbye Blue Sky is emotional just from the opening sound of the acoustic guitar, and while it doesn't go into detail, the emotion behind it, since it's symbolizing the bombing of London and the fear that people felt in such a rough time, I would consider it to be the saddest song on the album. Coincidentally, this is my venting music that I've used as not only artistic inspiration and influence as an animator, but also relief in seeing an album cover such complex topics of mental illness. How the mind perceives hard events in life. I consider Pink Floyd to be my favorite band today. The Wall is my undoubted favorite album, all thanks to walking in and absolutely scarring myself to an animation when I was a kid and low-key coping with it for over 10 years.